the whole purpose of today is to dispel myths, to dispel those myths, to basically get you an education on the difference between the types of sugar, but most importantly, to talk about the benefits of fruit and how it can actually help in your health and wellness goals. So let's jump in. Most of the confusion starts with visuals like the one to the right. This is one that I found in preparing for this presentation, where you have fruit being compared to basic table sugar, and trying to say that these are in essence the same thing. But the reality is they are nowhere remotely close to being the same thing. And you need to understand and appreciate that. And part of today is to basically dispel these types of graphs, and more importantly, to give you the education so that you can make informed choices. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the value of the orange versus the value of a teaspoon of sugar, they're not remotely the same. The orange is 17 grams of carbohydrates, yes. 12 grams of sugar, yes. That's going to be fruit sugar. It's not going to be the type of table sugar that you see on the right. It also has 12% of your daily fiber, 100% of your vitamin C needs. It has B vitamins, potassium, antioxidants, anti-inflammatories. I mean, it is loaded with beneficial, healthy type items that you're looking for in your diet. The teaspoon of sugar, well, it's 16 grams of sugar. That's what it is. 16 grams is in a teaspoon of sugar. So what you get on the left is all of these health benefits. What you get on the right is just the sugar. So to say that they are the same or try to compare the two against one another is a little disingenuous. In fact, if you look at fruit, it's loaded with all kinds of health benefits. It has the antioxidants, it has the dietary fiber, it has water, which can be very important, especially when you have a large portion of the population walking around dehydrated, and they're full of natural vitamins and minerals, just part of the process of what they have in them. Refined sugar has no health benefits. It contains zero nutritional value. That's part of the problem with the processed sugar, with the processed foods that add sugar, and all of the sugar that is in all of the fast foods and processed foods and table-ready foods that we are consuming on a regular basis. There's no nutritional value in the calories that come with it. So that is a major difference. But really what you need to understand is there are different types of sugar. There's something called glucose, there's something called fructose, and there's something called sucrose. Now, if you look very closely, sucrose is nothing more than a combination of both glucose and fructose. That's right, it's the same chemical composition, just bound together. That's what we call sucrose. So we're going to go in and we're going to introduce these concepts of what they are so that you can truly understand them. So Sugar 101, here we go. Carbohydrates, also known as glucose. Okay, so this is what our body does to carbohydrates. It basically converts it over to glucose, and that glucose is used to fuel our everyday body operations. Now, the main thing that you need to understand here is this is metabolized in the bloodstream. And the reason why that's important is because glucose is when we're talking about, high blood sugar. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about glucose. We're talking about, the carbohydrates. We're talking about what it's doing in the bloodstream. So make sure you understand that's what we're talking about when we're talking about glucose. Fruit sugar are also known as fructose. Okay, that's part of the natural human diet. It tends to have less sugar by volume. In other words, a 100 grams of fruit versus 100 grams of carbohydrate or 100 grams of sucrose, you're going to have a lot less sugar in the natural fruit. Fructose is the only type of sugar found in fruit. So let me say that again. Fructose is the only type of sugar found in fruit, and it's metabolized in the liver, not in the bloodstream. So there is a huge difference there. You need to understand that glucose metabolizes in the bloodstream, fructose metabolizes in the liver. And then, of course, you have your refined sugar, also known as sucrose, which is that combination of the two, and that's the sweetener that's used in processed foods. It's, cheap to make, easy to add to things, and has a variety of different names, including our most well-used one, which is our high fructose corn syrup. But you can kind of see the concept there. If I'm telling you high fructose corn syrup, remember fructose is coming from fruit. Sucrose is a combination of glucose and fructose. So Now you understand the difference between them. So the table sugar is your sucrose, your fruits are your fructose, and then of course natural carbohydrates are your glucose. So this is what we need to take a look at. But the importance of fiber in fruit cannot be overstated. See, the fiber that comes from the natural fruit when you're eating it actually slows down the absorption of the sugar into your body, meaning you don't get that spike in blood sugar that comes when you consume other types of sugar. In other words, you don't have that same effect that you would if you were eating a processed food item or a candy bar or something else when you're eating fruit. So comparing the two together when they don't have the same effect on the body, especially when they have the fiber to basically slow that process down, is a very important distinction that you need to make sure that you know and that you understand. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest problems that we have in this country is the lack of dietary fiber in our daily food intake. There's a lot of people out there that don't get the fiber that they need every day, and as a result, suffer with some pretty severe constipation and other irritable bowel related issues. This was an interesting study that came out recently. It was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association by Dr. Ludwig, who's the director of the New Balance Foundation of Obesity Prevention Center at Boston's Children's Hospital. Again, we have to have childhood obesity specialists in this country because, unfortunately, our food supply is such that now 33% of our children are overweight. But what he found through some observational studies was that sugar consumed in fruit is not linked to any adverse health effects, no matter how much you eat. Fruit consumption is tied to lower body weight and a lower risk of obesity-associated diseases. So Dr. Ludwig, in his observational studies at Boston Children's, published an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association that basically came out and said, eat all the fruit that you want. Because what he has seen is a large fruit consumption usually leads to lower body weights and a lower risk of obesity-associated diseases. But again, you can always find these types of studies, but you have to be very careful because there's certain things you need to understand. First, high blood sugar is caused by too much glucose in the blood. That can lead to diabetes. We know that. So that's, when you go have your blood test done, one of the things they're looking at is your glucose reading. And they want to know, is it above a 100? Because if it's above a 100 but below a 126, then you're what we call pre-diabetic. If your glucose number is above 126, well, now you're a type 2 diabetic. So that's kind of what we look for, is that glucose in the blood. And we now know that table sugar and or carbohydrates, natural carbohydrates, are what is converted over to glucose and basically is metabolized through our bloodstream. Fruit, on the other hand, is fructose processed through the liver. So it's a different thing. But the thing that you do need to know about fructose, and this is a lesser known fact, is your liver will convert excess fructose into triglycerides. Those triglycerides get stored in fat cells and they contribute to increased visceral belly fat that has been directly linked to diabetes. So while the good doctor may have said eat all you want because in his observational studies he saw people with lower body weights and lower risks of obesity-related diseases, the fact still remains that if you basically eat way too much fruit, your liver will convert that over to triglycerides. Those triglycerides will get stored in fat, which will contribute to belly fat, which has been a direct link to diabetes. So maybe not the direct glucose, blood sugar related diabetes issue that so many people thought when they were trying to compare regular table sugar with fruit, but it does have a secondary type approach that can actually get you to the same place if you eat too much of it. So this is one of those examples of too much of a good thing can in fact be a bad thing. But based upon most of the studies that have been done, we don't eat enough fruit to even get remotely close in this country. In fact, less than 74% of people get 6 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. So you have to know that as well. One of the things you can watch out, though, for is the high sugar content or the high fructose content fruits that are out there. So like a pineapple, has 16 grams per cup. An orange has 17 grams, a banana 18 grams, and grapes 23 grams. By the way, bananas, let's talk about those real quick, because one of the things that people want to eat a banana for is the potassium content. If you look closely and do a little research, what you're going to find is bananas rank number 1,622 on the food potassium content by volume rating, right below Reese's Pieces. That's right. The number one volume potassium food on the planet is something called kale. In case you were looking for that, that is a green vegetable. So if you're eating bananas for the potassium, you might want to rethink that. But do realize that they are on the high sugar content or the high fructose content side, and then of course grapes as well. Some of the other things that you might want to be aware of that have more than 10 grams per serving are apples, bananas, cherries, grapes, pineapples, mangoes, kiwi, and pears. Those are all considered high sugar fruits because of the more than 10 grams per serving. So if you're trying to start to eat your fruit and want to look for some, then by all means just realize that if you're eating these fruits, eat them in moderation because they do have a higher sugar content. And remember, the whole idea here is any excess sugar the liver is going to convert over to triglycerides, and that's going to be stored in your fat cells. So just know that going in. One other thing that we need to make sure that we touch on with regard to this topic is a whole fruit versus a canned fruit. A lot of people, when they decide that they're going to eat fruits or start eating fruits again, they go grab the can. Why? Well, it's convenient. It's easy. It's already been peeled. There's not a lot of work involved with it. Well, this is pears. So, a serving of pears is roughly 60 calories with 12 grams of fruit sugar, what we refer to as fructose. The canned, on the other hand, is a little different. Same serving is 100 calories. It's 19 grams of sugar. Because, see, they are stored in what's called heavy syrup. That heavy syrup represents 40 calories and 7 grams of sugar. And in many cases, that heavy syrup is basically the sucrose version of the sugar. So what you have is you have the good stuff, but it's now been mixed with the bad stuff. Yes, it's going to have a sweeter taste. Yes, it's going to be easier. It's going to be more convenient. But you need to appreciate or understand a lot of times the benefits are not as great because of all the downside of having to also consume the extra calories and, of course, the sucrose and glucose that comes along with the canned variety of the fruit. So make sure that if you're going to start on the fruit again and add it to your daily intake and your nutritional values, make sure that you're going to the whole fruit, the real, natural, organic fruit. Start there. It's much better for you. So what's your takeaway? Fruit and table sugar are not the same thing. They are not created equal and should not be confused with one another, but too much of a good thing could be a bad thing. So that's the whole purpose of today, is to basically show you that there's been a lot of confusion created by the visuals created by people in the know that are basically comparing table sugar and fruit as basically having this content. It could not be further from the truth. And there's a lot more that we could talk about, but today's whole purpose was to go through the basics, to basically give you the information, to give you the permission to start eating your fruit again. But realize that too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Watch the volume. Watch what you're consuming. Make sure that you're eating the lower sugar content fruits, and you'll be just fine.